So Barry's been a reader for 20 years. He's currently the president of Great Britain and Ireland Urantia Association. And Barry, if you'd like to go ahead, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever side of the planet you're on. Great to be back here again. So today I won't be doing much by way of screen sharing. I would be doing just a talk on random things. I kind of got this invitation at short notice, so I'm going to be jumping from topic to topic. What I was thinking during the week about what I might discuss, I kind of had a thought during my meditations, and one of them was of saying that Jesus, which is sufficient unto the day of troubles thereof. And when I thought about that, it kind of got me thinking about how I like to play around with things that Jesus has said and interpret them in different ways. So one of the things I thought about, sufficient unto the day of the troubles thereof, is if you turn it around, you get the idea sufficient unto the day are the joys thereof. And I think that's very important. It's something that I've learned over the years in terms of my spiritual development and spiritual growth, that at one particular phase in your life, you have a certain capacity for joy, a certain capacity for happiness. But as you grow and as you mature and as you learn about different things and acquire higher hopes, your capacity for joy and peace increases, you know. So when I thought about sufficient unto the day are the troubles thereof, I think a good one for this next phase of our spiritual evolution is sufficient unto the day are the joys thereof, because there's always joys to be had. One of the things to talk about in the Urantia book is progressive righteousness. And they keep alluding to this idea, this theme, progressive. And when we say consider our material forms, our bodies, and we look at it, say, from an exercise point of view, we can say if we start exercising daily, we'll be able to, say, run 1 mile. And if we keep it up, we can run 2 miles. And if we keep it up, we can run a marathon and then an ultramarathon. And we can slowly but surely, progressively achieve greater and greater things. And the same is true in all directions, forward and back. So what I mean by that is that I interpret, I see that there's a great force at work in the universe, and it's called the will to perfection. You know, Friedrich Nietzsche talked about the will to power. I think that the will to perfection is much more real. So when we look at the will to perfection as it is applied to our lives, we can see how, from a material point of view, from our body's point of view, when we exercise, any effort we make, the body sees that as a challenge and it causes it to respond better. So that we are better able to run, we're better able to lift more weights, we're able to run faster, run longer, and stuff like that. Our body itself, when you start engaging in those things, it causes all sorts of physical reactions. It causes your arteries to widen. It causes your body to increase the production of hemoglobin. It causes the body to dispose of impurities, so that by striving to achieve something greater, your body is transformed into something greater. And that is a very profound, how would you say, a very profound thing. And it applies not just to the body, but to the mind and to the spirit. And when we think about the soul, the Urantia book says that the soul needs both nourishment and exercise. I thought that was really cool. It needs nourishment and exercise. And the way the soul is nourished is through the contemplation of the divine, contemplation of truth, beauty, and goodness, the roles that they have in your life and where they can be fitted in. And the exercise is in the manifestation of the fruits of the spirit. And when we look at a life of progressive righteousness, we start off with, say, this amount, but we progressively grow to more. So we begin at a state of less righteous to a state of more righteous. We begin from a state of less patience to a state of more patience. And from a spiritual perspective, that is spiritual growth. As the divine ideas of the eternal seize our imagination, they begin to have a transforming effect on our thoughts and as a consequence on our actions in the world. there's a guy, James Allen, he has this cool statement. He says, habits of mind crystallize into habits of conduct, and habits of conduct crystallize into circumstance. You know, so that ultimately the things that you harbor within yourself will come to manifest themselves or leave a trace in your life as you go on. So that's why it's so important for us to focus on feeding the inner man with how to say, inspiring and wholesome and pure foods, as opposed to feeding the mind up with the spirit poisons of anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, those sorts of things, which are ultimately biologically rooted. Now, there's a couple of things that we might be interested in exploring when it comes to all this. One of the things that the Urantia book talks about is the transfer of the seat of one's identity. And you read those kind of words, and you're like, what are these guys talking about? Because it's kind of profound, but there's a part of you that says, yeah, that makes sense, but what does it mean? You know, how do I make sense of that? How does that kind of affect, in a real way, my world? So I want to park that for a second. I'm going to come back to that, the transfer of the seat of one's identity. And I'm going to bounce on to another thing. Over and over again, we read this idea that the eternal foundations, what is it? I actually have it written down here somewhere. Like when we eventually attain kind of a moral consciousness, we are bestowed with the spirit, and that becomes an absolute focal point for our personality. Okay, and it says that the spirit can become the eternal foundations and the guiding stars of our personality. Now, when I reflect upon the idea of the foundation and the eternal foundation, I'm kind of thinking about a house, because a lot of my friends over the last few years have built houses. My sister-in-law has just had her house extended, and they've put down big foundation. And I was kind of looking at that, and I was thinking about the eternal spirit that is granted to us, and that it is changeless, you know. But we are all change. We're personality, but we are all change. And I began to think about that a house, if it's going to have any strength in it at all, has to be built upon the foundations. You know, I can build anywhere I want, but unless I build on the foundations, then my house has no strength. My house will fall. Whatever I do will not prosper. So the analogy of the eternal foundations, or the foundations of the eternal, teaches us that we, by free will choice, get to conform with the foundations of the eternal. And insofar as we succeed in conforming with the pattern of the eternal, just so we achieve happiness, just so will we succeed in our paradise adventure. I kind of thought that was a very interesting thing, you know, that I think part of our journey is actually trying to dig up the earth to find the foundations so that we can see what's going on, so that there's a bit of adventure, a bit of searching, a bit of mystery involved with finding out who we truly are and who we truly could be, and what is the most ideal expression of ourselves. And we have limits when it comes to that in terms of the fact that we're creatures of the flesh and that our ultimate destiny is spiritual. But there's a lot we can achieve here. There's a lot of happiness we can achieve here. And all happiness ultimately is an indirect consequence of the achievement of a higher reality. And that higher reality in nearly all cases is service. Service to one's fellow man, service to God. You know, as you adore God and as you love God, you pour out that love onto your fellows and try to so live your life that everyone you encounter receives the benefit therefrom and becomes better. Now, as I thought about that metaphor of the foundation, another thing struck me, that the actual building blocks of the house are things like peace, patience, forgiveness, tolerance, forbearance, joy, humility. You know, they're the building blocks upon which we establish these, what they call the dimensions of righteousness, you know. So that God provides us the foundations, and he also provides us the spiritual means through which to achieve these things. For me, the path, this improving our way to heaven, this path to heaven, is a pursuit of perfection through the progressive manifestation of the fruits of the Spirit in ever greater proportions. You know, so we can't get to heaven without patience, without tolerance, without forgiveness, without forbearance, without kindness, without love, without truth. And insofar as we get them into our lives, that far we've found heaven. So one of the things that Jesus did in his life is that he said, I leave you peace. My peace I give you, but not as this world gives you. I give you all that you can take. Okay, whoa. Pardon me, my computer is on how would you say? It's a work computer, so the screensaver came in. So where was I? I give you all you can take is what I was saying, yeah. So the joys, God doesn't hold back on joy. The paradise personalities don't hold back on joy. The only restraint that heaven experiences is restraint that is within us, you know, and it isn't. From paradise's perspective, it's putting endless pressure on us in order to expand out our capacities and our abilities. You know, we start off with this, but eventually it grows in the same way that when we exercise, our arteries get wider. The walls of our vessels, of our arteries actually get thicker so that they can take more blood and at a higher pressure, so that we can deal with the stress much better, more efficiently. You know, like even the mitochondria in your muscles, like when you don't exercise, they tend to kind of fall out of alignment or whatever. But when you exercise, it kind of shocks the body. The body realizes it's inefficient, so it straightens all your mitochondria up, so that for the more efficient distribution of energy. And ultimately, then when it comes to facing a challenge again, the next time you face that challenge, it's actually easier for you, so that that challenges actually make you stronger. It's easier for you to do. So the things which would have overwhelmed you in the beginning are easily to do in the end. So that when God is setting us up for a life of progressive righteousness, he's setting up for a life of kind of progressive problem solving. He's trying to unleash our ability and our capacities. I remember once I had a very profound spiritual experience, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. In this experience, I had, say, an encounter with, let's say, an angel, and I don't know what it was. And he turned around and he said, "Look over here." And there was a small little child, and 5 or 6, and he was playing with this toy, or maybe 4 or 5. Right? He was playing with this toy, and for all the world, it was like a Rubik's cube, and it was like a little puzzle. Now, in the distance, you could sense that the father was kind of keeping an eye on the child, but he wasn't fully engaged. He was just keeping an eye in the distance. So the child was kind of playing with the puzzle, and every time he solved it, it popped, you know, and it got really exciting. It's like, "Oh, this is amazing!" But it became more complex, and so he tried it again, and it popped. But eventually, it kind of hit a point of where the little lad wasn't able to really solve it. He was very, very confused by it, and he started getting frustrated and terribly upset. And before long, he was in a full-blown tantrum, thrown it to the ground, banging his fists and his legs. He was like, "Oh my God, I gotta!" And I was kind of looking at this little lad freaking out, and the angel kind of tapped me on the shoulder and says, "See that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's you." And suddenly I had this flood of inspiration, and it said that the gift that you got from your father was the gift of life. And this gift challenges you all the time, up to your limit. And every time it challenges you and you succeed, it pops and opens up a whole new plane of opportunity and for development. But life is always seeking to challenge you to dig deep into the resources that you have inside, so that you can manifest that potential you have to the world, and ultimately to be able to bestow that potential upon the world in service, so you can transform it. And I thought, can't imagine the impression that experience had on me, because I could see straight away then in my life that there were so many things that had upset me, had confused me about life. And then I saw that it was just an opportunity for me to discover who I could be. You know, that one of the things that emerged for me was that, you know, you could just, instead of freaking out about things, you could just sit down and wait, listen. Instead of just stamping your feet, screaming, roaring, just stop, because the whole universe is trying to whisper clues and hints, kind of saying, anytime you look in the corner there, notice anything funny about that red dot there, you could maybe move that. The hints to help us overcome the challenges we face are always there. And it's about us stilling the mind so that we can actually learn to tune into them, realize that the universe isn't out to overwhelm us, it's out to liberate us. And it's our own perspective on the issue that can create the darkness and the upset. It's not heaven, because that's one of the next thing that happened in this experience was the father turned around to one of his, I would say, courtiers and tapped him and says, "Go and have a word with my son. My gift is not supposed to have this effect." And when I heard that, this guy turned around and says, "You are his son." I was like, "Oh my God, that's everything started to fall into place." And I see life as like that. We get these opportunities, these challenges, and sometimes they're terrible challenges, sometimes they're huge. But the universe never gives us more than we can bear, never more than we can manage. And in every instant, there's always an opportunity for dignity. There's always an opportunity for self-respect. Now, one of the things I've learned about this, improving our way to heaven, it's about self-improvement. There's a guy called, again, I mentioned him earlier, James Allen, and he talks about obedience. Start off, obey. And we see that over and over again inside the Urantia book to talk about the nature of obedience, and the role that it plays, and that it's important for us to obey. And I always kind of found it funny that this is a word that they labored so often. And so I was reading James Allen, and he pointed out that when a child starts off, all you need from a child is obedience. Right when they're real small, because they're too young really to understand why a thing has to be done or what a thing has to be done. So just for right now, just please do as you're told. For the love of God, just do as you're told. Because you can't understand why things have to be done a certain way. But as they get older and they begin to see, well, if I do it this way, it works out better, and if I don't, it turns into a mess. And I think God is very generous in giving us an opportunity to make a mess of our lives. He gives us loads of opportunities to absolutely turn it into a train wreck, but seldom will He do it so that it's unsalvageable. There's always a way to turn around. There's always a path to redemption. And when it comes to redemption, there's that lovely parable of the penny, where the plantation owner is going around and he's looking for people to come and work, and he promises everybody a penny a day. And when he promises them a penny a day, first guys in the morning, they get a penny, and then he goes around again at lunchtime and he picks up another set of guys and they get a penny, and then right just before the end of the shift, he brings in more lads and he pays them a penny. And the lads who labored all day in the sun kicked off about it. How come they're getting a penny and we're getting a penny? We worked all day. He said, I made a deal with you. You were happy with that this morning. And for me, when it comes to redemption, it doesn't matter where you start in the experience. The end point is the same. It's God, the limitless one. When you traverse the universes of time and space, when you vanquish time and space and ultimately stand in the presence of the eternal and the infinite, it justifies everything. It explains everything. It makes all things equal, so that there is no such thing as we're at the moment kind of obsessed with ego and stuff like that, and our place in the world and our status in the community and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't matter to God. And when you achieve God, all that stuff vanishes, and you're liberated from that. At least in paradise, whatever about here, it's kind of tricky for us to shake that stuff off. One of the things that I find is worth reflecting on is the fact that we are biological beings, and our biology has a huge impact on our thinking, far more than we realize. I think it allows us stability, and for the ancients, a predictability in terms of our behavior patterns. And it's insofar as we learn to harmonize with the spirit, and insofar as we learn to harmonize with love, that we become creative in life. We become a source of genuine positive transformation in the world. And I think that's very significant. That insofar as we harmonize with the divine, insofar as we conform with this perfect pattern, which is the foundation of our personality, that we become creative. And we know that because all the other kind of emotions to which we're subject to, which are belonging in the body: fear, anger, envy, jealousy, resentment, spite. Those sorts of things they're biologically rooted, and insofar as we are taken up by those, that is where ultimately the seat of our identity belongs. Now, the Urantia book talks about morality and loyalty and duty, and says that a lot of these things are kind of biologically rooted, but because we're potentially divine beings or spirit indwelt beings, those attributes, loyalty and duty, these can be transferred from a loyalty and duty towards material people, institutions, community, races, cultures, religion, to a divine reality. We can become loyal to God, loyal to truth, loyal to beauty. And sometimes in effecting that transition from loyalty to a material world, or to the values of a material world, to loyalty to a divine world, there can be a rupture in relationships, because people don't understand why you're pursuing a different value, why these values suddenly seem important. Values are tremendously significant because they vary from the absolute to the relative. And as we progress towards higher and higher values, the arc of our life turns, the trajectory of our life turns, and it spirals inwardly, I guess, or whatever way you want to turn towards the absolute. But while our values are materialistic, then they're trending around the proclivities and the weaknesses, the frailties of the flesh. And insofar as we become conscious of the biological process that influence our thinking, in that which we become capable of self-control. Now we know things like anger. Anger is it represents a loss of control of the self. Urantia talks about that. Anger is a handy one. It handicaps the spirit, is what it says. So that basically its hands are tied. We cut loose, we kick off. We always emerge at the far side of that with a little less dignity than we had gone into it. Anger always diminishes dignity. It doesn't cover us in glory. Whereas patience, forbearance, tolerance, gentleness, humility, those things are cool. Those things are amazing. They never make a shame of us. So this idea of the transfer of the material nature to the divine nature is a transfer of loyalties and a transfer of values, of consciousness of values, from material levels to divine levels. And sometimes part of that path involves walking away from the world, walking away from the values of the world. The thing that Jesus said: if you were of this world, the world would love you, but you are not of this world, you are of a higher world, therefore the world rejects you. So spiritual people live in the world, but they are not of the world. They are tending towards somewhere else. They love the world for what it could be, not for what it is. Well, there is boundless beauty on the earth, and sunsets, and the laughter of your children, and the play of your friends, and in a romantic dinner, in music, in just countless beauties in the reality that we live in. There's limitless beauties ahead of us, and these are there for our attainment. Now, as I say, I didn't have too much to prepare for this, so I going to be bouncing between different things. If anybody wants to ask a question, or they can, or say something, or if you wish, I can move on to other issues that might be worth exploring.
Here we go. Hara, would you like to go ahead?
Hi,
Yes.
Hara.
Hi, Barry. Thank you very much. It was really, really good, without any notes or any visuals as well. Well done. I just wanted to remind ourselves that we're actually living a double life. We're actually progressing on a Urantia level while we're here. And I think it's important to remember that we're trying to exist on two levels at once, which is an interesting thing. And the other thing, when you said at the beginning about living with joy every day, I mean, God wants us to be perfect as He is perfect. And we can't be perfect. We try hard, but we can't. But we can make each day as perfect as possible for ourselves. Guy Perron is always saying that. And I think that's a good thing to remember. Try and live a perfect day. Thank you.
Go ahead, David.
Well, being from the United States, I have to say good morning to everyone, Barry. This is the first time I've actually heard you speak, Barry, give a talk. You're wonderful. Just before I came on here, somebody had posted a chat and said, Barry, keep talking. I have to agree with them. You're really good. One of the things you mentioned, there's a mention in the Urantia book about circle making decisions. And when I first read that, I'm thinking, what, and this was a long time ago, I'm thinking, what is a circle making decision? It's when everything in life, as you did the circle, you did the spiral, everything comes back to spiritual realities. All of the economic problems that this world has, all the political problems that this world has, you can't view all these things in isolation. It all comes, what's the word I'm looking for? The solution to all our problems always circles back to your personal relationship with your Creator. You kind of started to point in that direction. So that little spiral circle thing that you did made me think about this. So I'm going to stop talking because Barry, I agree with some of the other people in here. I want to keep going, keep going. I don't think an hour is long enough for you, Barry.
Thank you very much, David. We actually did speak before. The last time I was on, did the thing on becoming godlike. And you and I spoke during that event.
That was very brief, though. That was too brief.
Okay, so I'll continue on. One of the things that I think an important idea that people should get their head around, at least from my perspective, is a thing I call the blended self. Now, the blended self is basically our biological identity. In a sense, our ego is the avatar of our body. And when a baby is conceived, it starts off first inside the womb, and it's actually a living part of the mother. But once it emerges, it becomes it falls into the womb of the community, the womb of the family, and it's nurtured inside in that. And when a child comes out and it's landed into your arms, you get this instinct of defense, this like, I will die to preserve this thing, you know. Instead of the child relying on the mother's immune system to protect it, suddenly it co-opts the two parents, the aunts and uncles, the grannies and granddads, the neighbors and friends. They become part of the child's immune system. They watch out for it. They nurture it, they help it evolve. And as the child evolves, its sense of identity starts, because it's the only thing in the universe at one point. And slowly but surely, its imagination and its insight begins to expand, and it draws in mom and dad, brothers and sisters, the cat and the dog, the granny and granddad, and the communities expand outwards with it in the center. And it happens that the body begins to early learn certain distinctions, me and mine, you and yours, or thee and thine, you know. And there's we and us, and they and them. All this division, okay, but they're part of a blended identity. So you know, for example, that you're part of a we, that you're part of an in-group. When, say, you know, when you're, and I used this analogy before, not today, but say when it comes to somebody says something mean about your brother. When you're inside in high school and you've been fighting with your brother, you know, all the way to school, but the minute you go into the school ground, if somebody picks at him, you turn around and deck him. Don't you say that to my brother. You might have said something 10 times worse about your own brother. But if anybody says anything to you, or says anything about your dad, or says anything about your mom, you're going to kick off. because you're reacting from the blended self, from the we. You feel that we have been insulted, we have been threatened, we have been. So when you feel a we is an ego, a we is a blended self, a we has a transforming effect on the mind. A transforming effect on the mind, and we can become conscious of that. And we can, and if we're not conscious of it, it can lead us into all sorts of trouble. So we is important. Okay, I talked earlier about loyalties to material and to spiritual things. So we is important when it allows us to build ourselves up. Now, a child, a baby, what I call a xenomorph. Ever see Alien? Alien? A child is a xenomorph. It's born and it blends into its surroundings. So it becomes like its parents. It adopts the parents' values. It adopts the parents' manners of speech. It is cute as hell. And these are all what you might call evolutionary defensive mechanisms that ensure that the parents will try to preserve the life of the child. But at a certain point, instead of blending in, there comes a point in a child's life where it's got to stand out. It's got to choose its own path, make its own destiny. And that can be a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience, that depending on how tightly knit the social group is. If the group is supporting and nurturing, or if the group is smothering and choking. You know, the step to freedom, self-assertions, and self-actualization can be a pleasant thing, or can occasion hurt. Now, when we look at the blended self and how it affects us, and we look at religion, politics, economics, there's all kinds of we in politics. There's all kinds of we in religion, and the biological dynamics, the neurobiological dynamics that govern things like fear, the fight or flight response mechanism, that becomes operational. So if I personally am threatened, my brain is hijacked by the amygdala, that the lower limbic system engages, and it basically co-opts everything in my brain, the higher cognitive functions, to serve one goal: self-preservation. How the hell do I get out of here? How the hell do I stop this guy? What's going to go on? The fear seizes the higher cognitive functions and co-opts them to go for self-preservation. And it does it like that. You don't even have to think about it. It happens. The same thing occurs on a macro level, instead of a micro level, which is the person. Same thing occurs on a macro level. If the family is threatened, if the nation is threatened, if your religious community is threatened, you react from the same visceral level using the same neurodynamics in your brain, and you react the same way. So what happens when, say, you're being attacked? The brain filters data. It filters out the humanity of the other. Filters out the humanity of the other, and it just highlights all the ugliness and all that's different and all that's wrong, and all where it's weak, so that when you attack here, you disempower them, you overwhelm them. And we do the same thing on national levels, and we do the same thing when it comes to clash of religions and clash of cultures. And what we don't realize, people think that they're actually conscious when they're doing that, but they're actually acting from a subconscious or a pre-conscious biological predisposition, you know. So when you look at, say, the big conflict between Catholicism and Protestantism, what you saw there was a struggle for existence of the two different traditions. So their weapons weren't sticks and stones and knives, except sometimes they were stakes, burn you at the stake, tie you to the rack, a little bit of that going on. But realistically, the battle that took place in philosophy, and they argued against one another from a philosophical point of view, trying to undermine one another, one trying to exalt tradition, one trying to exalt scripture. And politically, whether you lean left or lean right, the same dynamics apply, the exact same dynamics. So they're all evil ones, you know, we are the righteous ones, you know, they're the vermin, we are the saviors, you know, everybody that's outside of your income is always a threat, it's always a nightmare. So it's always something to be neutralized, exterminated, you know. And you see when national leaders appear on television, they hate our way of life, you know, they hate what we do, they hate how we live, that's we've been doing that since we've started fights, since we first picked up sticks and stones, you know. And why? Because the biological foundations of this sort of thing are exactly the same as they've always been. What's different for us now is that we become conscious of the fact that we trend in this direction, you know. and until we become conscious of it, we can't stop it. We can't change it. I pointed out in the previous lecture, like, you know, that we can't change what we're not conscious of, you know, and we have to exercise considerable self-awareness to become conscious of the fact that we are under the influence of cultural conditioning and biological conditioning. And if we're going to overcome that, then we need to realize that it's there, you know. And you know it's there because a lot of it is very straightforward, and it's very, very, very different from your spiritual ideas. So when we think of, say, anger, you know, God doesn't get angry. That's not his way, you know. There can be chaos in the universe. That's not God personally going around smashing things up, like, you know. Oh, pardon me. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, folks. So I'm working today, and I was doing overtime with my team, and so I just got an update there. So I had to basically steal an office to do this.
Barry, we thought you were translated. That's what we thought.
Thank you very much. I'm working on that, Dave. But yeah, so when it comes to that, so there's a thing, and it was part of my last presentation called Theosis, which is basically the process of becoming godlike, and of basically transitioning from less perfect to the more perfect, from material to the divine. And when it's a Greek thing, it's kind of it's a big part of the Greek tradition, the Orthodox tradition. The Orthodox tradition, not necessarily Greek, because it goes all the way to Russia. And this Theosis is little throughout the Urantia book. It's the indivinization, it's the becoming God, like, you know, where Jesus became like us so that we could become like him. And so they teach about the techniques, and part of their techniques is practicing self-awareness. Just observing yourself, not necessarily looking to change yourself, but get to know yourself, like the Greek idea, you know thyself. Because until you know yourself, you're not really in a position to do anything. And so this idea of overcoming and of transferring one's identity from the material to the divine involves an awful lot of kind of becoming consciously aware of the importance of divine values and of the dangers of material values. One of the things that I think is a good analogy is when it comes to values, is when you're on an airplane and your co-pilot puts in his coordinates. Okay, we're going to take off to Nebraska. It's going to take us 3 hours. But if the values in his compass are off, even by a little, he's not going to end up where he wants to end up. You know, he's going to end up either in the side of a mountain or the other side of the planet or what have you. So what's happened is that his direction has been pulled off or skewed as a result of false values. And in our lives, as we attempt to pursue truth, beauty, goodness, happiness, health, and wholeness, and we end up achieving none of those things, we end up going from tragedy to disaster to heartache. We realize, what the hell is going on here in my life? How is it all going so badly wrong for me? You know, what am I doing wrong? So I begin to ask questions. Because I start asking questions, I begin to see, okay, my values are off. I need to adjust this. You know, I thought this would bring me here, but it didn't. You know, like I knew a particular chap, and he was told by his parents when he was growing up, the father, terrible advice for him. You know, he basically encouraged him that men take drugs and screw women, and that makes them happy. You know, so he went off and he did loads of that, and he ended up miserable. He was like, "But I did everything you told me to do. I did what they told me to do. How come I'm miserable now?" You know, and when you take advice from one generation, you apply it to your own life, and you end up unhappy. You begin to kind of question, really, was that good advice? Like, do we need to do something different? You know, do I need to start going in a different direction? This is then awakening to needs and a discernment of values, and that begins to transition you off into a new direction in your life, away from the people who accept the values and ideas that are handed down to them. Begin to search new, higher, more fulfilling, rewarding values. So when we look at the ideals of perfection, you know, we have to fall, the Urantia book says you have to fall wholeheartedly in love with the ideals the eternal ideal is perfection. Because I'd say it's probably nothing short of wholehearted love is going to be able to affect that transformations of character that you need in order to get off this rock alive, you know, and to affect the changes that you need to affect between now and paradise. When we realize that pursuit of perfection is actually the pursuit of a richer life, it's the pursuit of happiness. It's like, you know, if you are at this level of perfection, but you go to this level, it means that your life has increased in happiness, increased in richness, increased in wisdom, increased in joy, increased in peace, increased in integrity. You know, that's what the pursuit of perfection is. You know, it's not this idealistic, condescending thing that the ego is inclined to view perfection as, or I have all the power and you're all serfs, you know, which is ego. You know, ego sees itself as like it's always looking for the alpha. It's always looking to be top of the pile, you know. Whereas the values of the spirit is not looking to be top of the pile. You're looking to serve the most, you know. Let him who is greatest among you, let him serve everyone, you know. Anybody who desires to be great, let him serve everyone. That's the values of the kingdom. It's not about being king of the hill and being worshipped. It's about the service that grows out of the worship of the other, the service that grows out of the worship of the fellows, and the transformed life that manifests as a result of that love, that transforming service, and sees you from, as I say, a state of lesser perfection to a state of greater perfection, a state of lesser wisdom to a state of greater wisdom, lesser righteousness to greater righteousness, and from lesser happiness to greater happiness, to wisdom, from heartache to peace, to redemption. You know, there's the path towards the divine is a path towards strength, it's a path towards hope, it's a path towards all kinds of wonders and endless joys. And I never tire of kind of promoting that in any way I can. So when the title I was given to this bit of a talk was Improving to Heaven, it begins by improving yourself, and as you improve yourself, personal ability to experience happiness increases, and that's a good thing. But nobody else can do that for you. You know, nobody else can be patient for you. Nobody else can be kind for you. Nobody else can be humble for you. These are personal achievements. And when God talks about, you know, He first off He gives you the foundations. You're in with the Spirit, which allows you to conform your life to the ideal pattern. He also provides you then with the patience, the kindness, the righteousness. So He gives you the foundations, He gives you the building blocks, but you just have to build them. You have to put them, you actually have to do the work, you know. But He's done everything else. He's done everything else for you, you know, and He's made it fun along the way and eternally rewarding and all at the back end of it. So for me, the pursuit of God is the pursuit of perfection, and I don't see that what we have right now in our lives as being any less magical and wonderful than what holds us in the future. In the future, yes, there will be greater glories, yes, there will be greater wonders, yes, there will be greater revelations, but they're for a future me. They're for a me that's capable of enjoying those and appreciating those and bringing those into my heart in a transformed way. Right now, I have endless joys. I have endless frustrations too. This COVID thing isn't working for me at all. It's not going to work for me at all. I might do a talk on that, and we can set the world on fire in that one. But okay, we're moving into the last few minutes. So, would anybody care to ask a question?
Go ahead, Christian.
I wanted to say, in my life, anyhow, I guess in all of our lives, there's some moments along the way where you kind of realize you're on the same path because you speak to somebody else or they say something, and it happens on lots of levels all the way through our lives. But I just wanted to tell you, and I know that there's been moments in my life, and this is one of them, that you've just totally encouraged me, and the things that you've said have spoken. I haven't just been listening, but they've spoken deeply. The spirit in me was like a little spring lamb. Do you know what I mean? When they bounce. And it's not because I didn't know it. It's because you just explained so concisely to me that I knew I was on that path. And it totally encouraged me to go on it further. You've totally encouraged me. I found your talk, totally life transforming at this moment in my life. So I just wanted to give you a big thanks, my dear brother.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful praise indeed. I'm glad that I could be a part of that journey. Glad to put some wind into your sails.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Go ahead, Kat.
Yes, Barry, thank you so much for your presentation. Whatever you've discussed here, presented, is highly captured in part 1 of the Urantia book, that which pertains God, who God is, and how he relates with us, or to us, the universe, and generally humanity. I liked your prerogative on progressive righteousness, which is quite a unique approach to spirituality, because it is very funny that most humans have forgotten the working of the Spirit of Truth. That once the Spirit of Truth works in us, then we have progressive kind of righteousness you're talking about. That every day is an adventure, a spiritual adventure. Every day we have very different spiritual encounters and spiritual adventure. And surely the progressive righteousness there holds a lot of sense there. And then of course, there's this thing you talked about, material versus divine levels. Yes. There's that dualism that we have always confused ourselves in as humans. We always have a tendency to think we merge the two most of the time. When you think spiritual, then you start mixing spiritual with physical. Physical pain, that's when we talk of an angry God, a jealousy God, in that respect, because you're mixing spirituality with the physical human, the human you. Yes. And of course, this is highly psychological. When you go to the id, the ego, and the superego, then we have, when you don't comprehend those different levels of thought, then you have that conflict between yourself and the people around you, the spiritual world as well. And then you confuse everything and merge it up and then give whatever name you give it as a sense of whatever it is. I don't know what it would be. But I like that you basically defined the difference between the divine world and the physical world, the realm. Yes, the physical world, the spiritual world, and the physical world that we live in. And of course, the sense that there's duality, that we're living here, like Hara said, that we are living here, but also treasuring in the future spiritual us. Yes, so that sense there, I like the way you brought it out. And that ability, that imagery you gave us of being born. Yes, I was just presenting on the birth of Christ and what it means for humanity, the hope. That from the womb, that's another world, and you're coming out to another world. So you leave the womb world to the physical world here, which is of course the same as the womb you were describing. The imagery there, I liked it so much. It gave very good meaning to what you mean by transcending the spheres of existence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Barry. That was wonderful.